Welcome to Comedians Writing Standup Comedy Jokes. One day I'm going to write a better name for that, but for right now, it SEOs. I'm joined today by Matthew Broussard. Matthew, I'm so unbelievably happy to have you on the pod. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm waking up, having coffee, excited to throw some bad jokes your way.
This is actually extra special for me because we met randomly about 3 years ago. You gave me a tag for a joke, and I'd like to think that you were a part of my hero's journey.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were a part of this pod.
Was I the call to action, or maybe the one that got rejected? That's the only thing I know about hero's journey. The call to action.
Whatever part where the hero realizes that he's not the main character, that was me. That was me meeting.
That's funny. I love giving tags.
The way the show works is we're going to each take 2 rough jokes that we brought in. We're going to tell them as if we were on stage, and then we're going to talk about it and try to work it up. As always, if you're watching at home, I want you to remember that 1,000 monkeys could eventually reproduce the works of Shakespeare. You're smarter than a monkey, and we're not as good as Shakespeare. So get in that comment section and tell us how you would finish these jokes. Maybe you might hear us using your tags on stage. All right. Without further ado, our first rough joke is coming to the stage. Make some noise for Matthew Broussard. Zoom silence.
Joke. So it's not even new. I have a broad definition of what a new joke is because I spend a long time working on my jokes. This one I've been doing for at least a year, and it works, but I just feel like there's more to it, or I am really beating a dead horse. Premise is that I have trouble reading, and what I do to read is I read the book while listening to the audiobook at the same time, and it works, but I feel like such a little slut that I have to jam it in 4 different holes just to absorb anything. And tags are, what's it? I have to get spit roasted by fiction, and the punchline that I really like doesn't always hit. Is my fear is someone's going to hand me the book in Braille and I'll start tonguing the bumps. That's it. I don't know how to lead into the joke very well, except kind of like unimpressively just saying, "Oh, I tried to read more during the pandemic." Just some lame pandemic material that I'm somehow holding on to. And the ending doesn't explode. I find it fun and clever to conflate. To create another, an if this then of pairing 2 senses, sight and sound, and what are the other ones? Then it would be feel and taste. And perhaps if I could fit smell in there, but I might be assuming too much of the crowd. I have all sorts of theories to why the joke isn't working. Maybe the crowds don't like hearing someone talk about reading. Maybe it's like even if I'm coming from a self-deprecating place, it's still a flex.
So my initial reaction is, one, there's definitely something there, right? So, overstimulation. I think we all feel that,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think the joke is talking about being too stimulated, like whether it's not realizing how much time we spend on our phones. I'm guilty of, I'll play Risk on my phone and I'll have YouTube on at the same time. And then my wife will try to talk to me, and that's when my brain snaps. I can watch the video and play Risk at the same time. But when she tries to have a conversation with me, I lose track of all 3 things at once.
Yeah.
So I relate to the idea of the book and the audiobook. I guess part of the reason why I think you might be so I can't imagine them being at the same pace, right? So it feels forced. So like an audiobook, the guy's reading, but then when I read, I feel like I read faster than an audio. So the hard thing for me is the pacing. So like maybe we could address the pacing, or maybe you make it more exaggerated. Like, I listen to the audiobook for adults and I read the children's book with pictures. That way I'm going to remember something.
Relate to the idea of overstimulation.
Yeah, I relate to the idea of overstimulation. And I feel like one of the things that was like incongruent for me was I feel like the audiobook and my reading would be at different speeds, and I'd be at different places in the book. So maybe you exaggerate it more and you say, I listen to the audiobook and then I read the picture book for children. That way, something is getting through. Or maybe it's, I read the, synopsis of it on Wikipedia and I listen to the audio. So I think it can't be the same thing twice. I think it needs to be different forms where it's more exaggerated, where it sounds more believable. Right now, the believability of that is low. I don't feel like you actually do that. I feel like you're doing a joke. But if you told me it was an audible,
I'm not.
you're serious?
Yeah, this is a real premise. This came from me. This is what I actually do to read. And I sit around. Well, that's a good thing to know. The reality of it is suspended. So that's worth noting, because I would, if a joke is true, I need the audience to. I mean, there's certain jokes where I need the audience to believe me. Whether or not it's true is up for debate. But this is how I read. This is how I've gotten better at reading. I spent a couple of years doing this recently, and now I can read without the audio if need be. But I always like to do both.
How do you match the speed?
It's like setting a pace on a treadmill. You typically find where you are, and I could go into, it's not very funny, but I could go into, like, I can do a breathalyzer test for my cognitive ability at given points in the day. I know in the morning I'm 1.4, but my midday I might be 1.7, and then when I'm going to sleep I have to slow it back down to 1.2, because I can feel myself falling behind, and you have your brain is at the right level where you find yourself going ahead or falling behind. So it's cool to see and seeing what stimulants of nicotine or coffee and caffeine will affect the speed. But so I read, and I've met other people who do the same. It's wonderful. Wow. It's a full range of absorption. And I have to pay for the book and the audiobook, which is just my stupid tax.
Maybe you could add into this is actually real by, like, my girlfriend hates it. She'll turn the audiobook off, and I'll be like, hey, I was reading that. Like, hey, I'm reading here.
That's funny.
Like emphasize that this is a real thing that actually happens. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, like, what are other things? So, like, how do you earmark an audiobook? I guess it picks back up where you left off.
Works pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a premise I could do before of, like, I can't read, and the audiobook, I can't do audiobooks because I'm just too cocky about my own, like, ability. I'm like, I can do this while learning how to juggle on YouTube. It's not that I can't do well with audiobook, it's that I try to do other things when I can't even do one thing. I try to multitask when I can't even task, Yeah. And I guess it's just that raw feeling of when you feel like something's funny, because I'm sitting there on the subway of, like, this should make me feel smart. I'm reading a book, damn it. But I'm such an idiot. And if someone were to interrupt me right now, like when people walk on a train to, like, get my attention and I'm reading, I'd be like, I can't hear you, I'm reading. The silliness of the situation just strikes me. And I would like to write a joke about reading.
I think that the joke has legs in and of itself. The only suggestions that I have for it are, I felt the believability could be improved on. And then that might be
for sure
where you're losing. I also think if the crowd, like, most people don't read, I think something self-deprecating about, like, if it's a move, right? So a lot of times comics will have a way of making the joke work, whether the joke works or not. So we start something off and the crowd's not with us. We have a pre-canned, oh, you don't like this, but it sounds spontaneous, but it's a clever, you don't like this, right? So if they react strongly to reading, you go straight through the joke. If they don't react strongly, that's where you add the self-deprecating, I know how pedantic, I know how elitist I sound, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some kind of valve there. Yeah.
Yeah. I know how this sounds.
Yeah, anything that, I do that a lot, where anything that could be a brag, I try to deflate myself, like, in the process of setting it up.
Yep. Dope.
Yeah.
I like it. We have full inception. We have a podcast where we're talking about our writing process, and you did a joke orally about how you read and listen to audio. So I love it.
So transcript for the podcast, because that would really sell the whole thing.
One day it'll just be AI summarizing it for other AIs. Okay, I'm gonna do my first rough joke. Please tear it up. I believe I can handle it. I'm a big boy. I can handle the critique. Okay, coming to the stage. First rough joke. Josh Stramiello. Yay. I have this coworker I work with who's in his early 20s, and he's always bragging about how much he drinks. Bro, I drank like 8 lemon drops. He's gay. bro, last night was crazy. And I think he tells me this because I look like a bro, but I'm 34. If you want to impress me, don't brag about how much you drank. Just tell me anything you did hungover. Instead of, oh my God, I danced the night away. It's, yeah, I made it into work on time hungover. Instead of, oh, I drank all night and I made a new friend. It's, I made a new friend this morning hungover. We have a lot in common. Instead of, man, I got so drunk last night, I made $80. I don't know how I did it. Instead of that, it's, man, I was hungover and I didn't beat my kid. Like, I'm like, that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. So yeah, that's the joke.
I like it. The format that you keep saying hungover is a bit repetitive, so it needs to escalate, because you say while hungover 3 times, and that becomes too predictable. So what are ways to escalate it? What are things beyond hungover? You have to just keep building, like you were talking about with me, keep driving apart the extremes, the proficiency of the task with the degradation of the state you're in. You have to push those farther apart, because you're creating a nice parity escalating game, or I guess disparity. And the gay line throws me off because I don't know if it's real or a joke within it, if he actually is gay. Because if he is gay, that really changes the nature of the joke. I do like that he talks to you, like you drink. I think there's something, maybe that's insulting. Of and I don't even do you drink? Are you a drinker?
I do, and I am hungover right now. But like a lot of people,
nice.
A lot of people think I'm like more late 20s, maybe not in this exact moment, but like, people confuse me for still being a bro, and I have aged out of that game.
Yeah.
I don't really do it anymore.
That is very interesting right there. I do love and maybe it's just my perspective of being a 35-year-old, but I like shitting on young people for thinking that's impressive. That is a real young man's game that I once played of, we got so drunk. I don't want to hear how drunk you got. I want to hear how hungover you got.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about your successes. I want to hear about your failures. And then, I want to, and maybe the game isn't even, then you could say, you could maybe play a simpler game of, I got so hungover, I blank. People are like, I got so drunk, I blank. What about your hangovers? That is where the action is. So maybe it's not even what you accomplished well while you were hungover. Brag about the extent of your hangovers. And then you could build the game into the accomplishment portion.
Yeah. I also feel like drinking really hard in your early 20s is kind of like racking up student debt that you're never going to be able to pay for later. It's like, you keep that same behavior up later, and that
it's a good comparison.
Yeah. A real person inspired this, but it wasn't a coworker. It was a comedian, like that was like 24 that looks up to me, or like we're friends, but he thinks we're the same. It's like, dude, I got responsibilities and shit. Like, you're couch surfing. You want to drink till 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I can't be your friend like that. Like, that's where this joke comes from. It comes from a very real place.
Yeah, I do like that you made it not a comedian. I always try to make my joke, because so many people in my life are comedians, and I always try to change the stories to not be, because it creates a divide between you and the audience.
Yeah, the only reason I made him gay was because I really like the idea of like a masculine bro that just happens to be gay, but there's like nothing else going on in this.
Oh, he is actually, so he is supposed to be gay. Yeah. That is crucial. That would be the information that needs to pay off.
Yes.
Later, if you're going to drop that early in the joke, I feel
it's unexplored plot points.
Yeah, it's like an Easter egg. Yeah, when you plant that seed early on, it needs to bloom. I think you could twist this joke to maybe end on you of like, well, you know what I did? I listened to this story hungover, where you reveal that you're hungover at the end, and that gives it that nice kind of symmetry.
Try being your friend. Try
my jokes.
Try being your friend hungover.
I'm listening to you hungover, so that is my
Oh, I love that. I like the idea of like just like
I blank while getting my stomach pumped. That could be one of the escalations. So talking about you can't just keep saying hungover while getting my stomach pumped.
Yeah.
Impounded car from a prison cell. You know what I mean? Prison cell, posted bail, all those things you could do that are the remnants of a bad night of drinking.
Yeah. I like the idea of stomach pump. Liquid IV, dehydrated, like with leather skin and your third orange juice, try to watch your friend's baby, sing along to Blue's Clues, something like that.
Yeah, and then the end could be I started drinking again while I was still hungover. Like these games always benefit from. I mean, a good comedy story just starts where it ends.
Sadly, the fastest way for me to get out of a hangover is to start drinking again, which is not.
Yeah.
I get how it happens. Like I see alcoholics and I go,
dog, yeah.
I have empathy.
Yeah.
Okay, Matthew, thank you.
Yeah.
All amazing tags and ideas. But now that means we have the opportunity to go back to your second idea. So, yeah, take a second.
Oh man.
There's also a non-zero chance. I think we're gonna be good, but there's a non-zero chance that I lost the first 5 minutes of the recording when my internet went out.
Well, I stayed on.
Yeah, so I think we should be okay.
That helps.
I think we should be okay.
Man, should I try one that's just not good, or one that has a little bit of legs? What's the question,
bro?
You're
a nationally known comic, so your standard of good versus not good. I'm up here.
I write more bad jokes than anyone. I don't want to hear it. That's the thing. I just write a lot of jokes, and if it seems like I have good ones, it's because I write thousands and thousands of bad ones.
This is an opportunity for people to see why you're funny. So the joke doesn't even, you can start with a joke that's just a rough idea, pitch it as a rough idea, and then we can talk about the pitch. You have any way you can go with this. It's not rigid.
So many short ideas. I'm trying to I'm always, whenever I have a lot of ideas, I'm like, which one is the most personal? Because that's where I'm going to find the most material most of the time. Sometimes if it's just something I happen to know a lot about, that can spawn off like a longer joke, because to me, it's like, I love those 3 to 5 minute jokes and they're so hard to come by, but it needs to be, you can't write that about just anything. It has to have something.
We could do a series of one-liners for the back end. Like you want to do a couple shorter ones, we can do.
I have plenty of one-liners.
Yeah, we could do, see, I can't write one-liners, so we could do a couple one-liners and just interact with that.
So here's a joke my brother wrote that I think is so funny.
Formatting. All right, coming up with his second rough joke, Matthew Broussard. Yay.
So my brother wrote this and he let me steal it from him. Don't even know how to set it up, but there's only 2 genders, binary and non-binary. It gets 0 laughs. I cannot stress, it gets nothing on stage. So I tried to flip it around, where I made it into a conversation, which I hate a joke where it's a conversation and me winning the conversation. But like my friend was trying to, and that's why I try to make myself the dumb person always. But it was, my friend tried to explain to me. I used to think there were only 2 genders, and they tried to explain to me that there's binary people, but there's also non-binary. I'm like, that's still just 2. That works a little better, but it doesn't really work. It's so funny to me. Funny. It's like a set theory joke. It's so funny to me. It's like a good math joke.
You tweeted it? Is that out there in the world anywhere?
I don't like to tweet things that I might try on stage. I try to leave Twitter like just jokes that don't work on stage.
I think you need to tweet that right now, because 1, I think it'll do better as a tweet than as a joke because it's so short. But but we could still work on that. But 2, it's like, dude, I could see that. That is freaking genius, dude. And I like how it should make almost everyone uncomfortable on some level. Like, because when you think about it, you're saying there's only 2, binary and non-binary, right? Well, people that are on this on the left side of the spectrum want to say that there's, dozens and dozens and dozens of things. So they were offended by you saying there's only 2. And then people on the conservative side of the spectrum, they want there to only be 2. But then you told them that non-binary was one of them. So like the joke pisses everyone off.
My brother wrote, it's like my favorite joke my brother's ever given me. Yeah. And he's super not a comedian. It's fun. It's that, and it's also I love a joke that starts with an initial line of discomfort,
Yeah.
and then somehow justifies the point.
If we were gonna
Bill Burr strategy.
If I was gonna try to make that work as a joke right now, one of the things that I constantly play with is who is delivering. You already mentioned this. You said, I tried making it myself. I tried making it someone's. I tried making myself the stupid person. But I think if there's one thing that's true, it's that most people hate the edges of society right now. The edges that control, 99% of what we see on social media is that 2% fringe on either side controlling the narrative. And most people in the middle are tired of it. So one way you could try to get this through is you could have two people arguing extremist positions, and you come in and you beat both of them with that statement. So you're now the mediator, or you're the one that's just trying to get two people to shut up. Like maybe it's at work, maybe it's on a bus, maybe you're at a party and these two people are arguing, and then you shut them both down with that, because that statement is so pure. It also defeats both sides. Your purple-haired leftist is...
That's funny. I love that.
Your purple-haired leftist is going, there's millions of genders. And then the guy on the right is going, there's only men and women, there's only two. And you come in and you go, guys, I think I can solve this. There's only two. Yeah. There's only two types of people.
That's a really interesting way to frame it.
Yeah. It's still clever.
It basically act like it's like an olive branch. It's like it's some kind of a chord between them that I'm building, and it actually deflates both of them, or it defeats both of them.
Yes.
That's funny. That's a good way to frame it. So I'd have to think of the situation. I have an adjacent joke about a friend coming out as non-binary, and this one actually does have legs. Works with very liberal crowds. But doesn't have a punchline that I find very clever. I had a friend come out as non-binary, which means they go by they and them pronouns, and that's it. That's it. It's people make this big deal out of being hard to. It's not. It is hard. I'm lying. It is hard to get their. It's not hard to get their pronouns correct. It's hard to not pat myself on the back every time I do. That's the challenge of that. This is my friend Taylor. They are pretty cool. And from there I do a little act out, but nothing that really adds information. So I always think the last line should add some piece of information. And this one doesn't have anything at the end that really builds it out. But I thought liberals would hate that joke. It's conservatives who just don't connect with it at all. In Brooklyn, that joke tends to actually find a spot inside people that they're quietly ashamed of, and realize they're not alone, and realize it's not the worst. I mean, if someone wants to be offended by that joke, they can go ahead. But I think that joke comes from the position of a guy who's trying to do well, do right, but is still kind of a fucking idiot, which is me.
Well, what I love about it, and I just heard it. So like sometimes in writing, and I'm saying this more for the crowd than you, please feel if I ever sound like I'm trying to be educational, it's to the monkeys in YouTube, but definitely not to you. Okay. But sometimes a tag or a punchline is a expression, or an act out, or a pause. And so like when you were telling me that, I heard a pause and an act out with the face. So it was like, you're like, yeah, I just can't, it's really hard to not congratulate myself. I'll be like, hey, this is Taylor there. Like you just lean in like you're like a dog waiting for a treat. Like they.
Yeah. I physically pat myself on the back for the act out in the joke, which feels a little not creative. Maybe I should switch the word pat on the back to visually congratulate myself. And then then rather than using the phrase pat on the back, the act out of pat on the back becomes new information.
Yeah. Like you're
becomes a new, rather than saying it, demonstrate it.
I think you can say every time you use the correct pronouns, I pause and I wait for someone to congratulate me, right? It's like, this is my friend Taylor.
Yeah.
Hey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could probably just milk it harder, and you're back. It paused you right after they, and then paused you for a solid 30 seconds. I was like, he's really milking this, huh?
yeah, just to lean forward on the they, and we could jump right back into that. So yeah, I think there's a physical act out there.
Yeah, but I'd like some new information at the end. What's the, my game is always that's like, or if this then. That is always my way to expand an idea, and I don't know I haven't found how to build bigger from there or pull it in more personal. That's the other way to take it. I think the last line I have right now that I like, but it's very inconsistent, of like, look at you, little rock star, adapting to minor inconveniences. And that is I think, a good personal summary of it, but it's not the punchline I hoped it would be.
Yeah. I also, this is kind of like an offshoot of what you said. I don't know if it fits anywhere, and if you don't like this, maybe I'll run it as its own joke later. But conservatives won't say they, so it's like maybe non-binary people just need to date more. Like maybe the problem is that they're single, because if there were two or more of them, conservatives would use the right pronouns. Like, where are those stupid?
Whoa, that's funny.
Where are those stupid leftists at? Oh, they are over there. Like, as long like the secret to gender identity is to travel in numbers, non-binary people. Like that, it's like a wolf pack. Like you just got to stick together, and now you'll be accepted.
Look at all them. They want to be called they and them, and I'm not going to call them that. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Freaking
travel in packs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wolf pack. I hate all of them. I hate all of them. I hate each individual one of them.
I hate all thems.
Well, first of all, thank you for correctly gender identifying. I'd like to start off with that. Yeah. I think that's got legs. You got one more short one?
Oh, short ones? Yes, 1 second.
Because you gave us like a one-liner, and that was the most productive conversation we've had so far off of that. So. Also, I just like to throw this out, right? I want to call myself out. While you're looking for that. The hardest thing in comedy, I think, is writing a good one-liner. There's this old phrase, I apologize for how long my letter is. I would have written a shorter one if I had more time. Yeah, if I'd had the time. I think that
I've never had that experience. I'm myopic with jokes. I'm very focused on the punchline, and I have a harder time expanding the idea.
That makes sense to me with like a math background, because any extra letters or information makes math harder, right? So as me, like I have 20 years of speaking experience. I started preaching when I was a teenager. So speaking is something that I feel really comfortable with. But being precise is not. It's not. It's like, oh, you're a lawyer. Why wouldn't you be precise? Well, because we get paid by how long we work. So no one's ever like, hey, man, you really need to write less. In fact, they're like, hey, here's all these extraneous and superfluous words that you can shove into this into this document. So I come back and I try to do comedy, and it's like, be funny in a sentence. And that is something that I really struggle with.
Love that part of it. I mean, it's really hard and really painful. It's just beating your head against the wall, just the right single jokes. But when you have it, and you know you got it.
Yeah.
For the most part.
I think I have.
What do I got here?
Like 3 one-liner jokes that I would use, and I'm not a fan of any of them. But like, if I have like a weird segue or something, I'll be like, I look like I used to work out. And that usually gets like a laugh, but I have so few.
My only problem with one-liners is they're like basically never original. Like I don't know I've ever written like a perfect one-liner that hasn't. I think I have one-liner joke I wrote in my first year of comedy that I still stand by, and perhaps it's not as original as I thought it was, but it's just, I feel like if Abraham Lincoln were alive today, he would say, seriously, guys, I wore that hat like one time.
It's really funny.
Remember, the me who wrote that was like 8 months into comedy, was writing horrible, hacky, offensive bits, and I found that joke in a notebook long after I wrote it, and then ended up using it in conversation, talking to like 2 comedians, which is a real faux pas, and they both laughed, and I was like, huh, that's a fun one, because it defies a lot of the standard formats. Yeah.
Okay, so you said that, and that triggers. I had a joke that I was looking through my joke list, and I was like, don't do this one, no matter what. Do not do this one on the pod, with Matthew Broussard, but I wanna bring it out. So Memorial Day, I'm hanging out with some friends, older friends, very drunk, and like you know how this is when people know you're a comic, like people that are non-comics that constantly bombard you with ideas like you can't have a conversation with them without them going, hey, you can use this, you can use that, like hey, here's a, and it's like a street joke that they're trying to give you at best.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with them. It was talking about I don't remember how it got brought up, but it was Helen Keller. We were talking about Helen Keller, and I'm gonna skip the conversation, but this is the idea for the joke. The idea for the joke is like, she was actually brilliant. Like this is true. Like Helen Keller wrote like dozens of books. Mark Twain had a crush on her. Like she met Alexander Graham Bell and he was one of her tutors. These are all true. Like the more I read about Helen Keller, the more impressed I was. But she also was blind and deaf and mute, right? So there's this brilliant person that's like trapped in this shell that would come out later as an adult. But like if you've ever watched the movie Daredevil, you know that when you lose a sense, the other one's heightened. She lost 3. So like her sense of smell during that period where people only bathed once a week, like they had a thing in there and they were like, she could recognize someone by their footsteps, by the vibrations of their footsteps. I'm like, bullshit. She recognized them by their odor. Like I can just imagine Helen Keller sitting down at the dinner table and someone farts thinking they're going to get away with it. And a 6-year-old Helen, cursed by her inability to communicate, is just like, and like, despite being blind, she just like Daredevil points at the farter across the table. It's like,
Yeah.
It's like, it's horrible,
So funny.
but it has so much education shoved in it because like you learn all these Helen Keller facts, and it's like I really want to take that and make it like an exaggerated bit about Helen Keller, but yeah.
I like it a lot. I think this is my personal taste, and to each their own. I don't think it needs an act out at the end. I think that would be a fun joke to land with whenever you're dealing with something that like harsh and it's a rather blunt kind of thing to go after the way she communicated. Whereas if you could find a way to make all that happen without actually doing it,
Yes.
with having the right words to kind of paint that picture,
Yeah.
and put that picture in people's heads without having to do I'm going to be honest, a mean impression of her. The idea of that poor lady and her truffle pig nostrils, that's something we don't talk about is just and you could even set it up so simply of like, Helen Keller, brilliant author, brilliant figure. We all know that people gain a sense when they, lose one, like Daredevil. She lost sight and hearing.
3.
Her that sense of smell must have been, would it be 3? I think it would technically be 2. You can say 3 because I'm all about kind of
lying
up
a little, yeah.
Because on a technical
She
argument,
was dumb, deaf, and mute.
yeah, I don't mind it.
Speaking is not a sense.
But dumb is not a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crowd's not gonna. I think you pick up on that
Taste-
on a third redraft. I don't think the crowd's gonna catch that. Just like they're not catching.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. And if it's wrong, it's even better. A lot of times, getting things wrong in a joke just catches people's attention.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
What?
And perhaps I should take that into account in my reading joke when I say 4 different holes, because it is 4. I should say 5, just to add that perplexity to it. My friend Chase DeRusso had a great way of just lying at jokes.
So I want to say that if this wasn't clear, I'm not trying to be mean with the act out, right? What I'm trying to do with the act out is, one, that's exactly how Helen Keller would have looked and sounded. So like any autobiographical depiction, like that's what a person without these senses. So, and again, she couldn't see either, right? So I want to, like, someone that's like, oh, I didn't fart, and she's pointing, like she's pointing to the fart, like she can see the fart. Like Daredevil has like the red mist that he can see through with echo vibration. She's just using her sense of smell to point through the room to the person that farted. So I understand how a lot of people can interpret that as mean. I'm trying to set the picture of this like Daredevil nosed Helen Keller in a society of people that didn't bathe regularly. That's so it's not about deafness generally or blindness generally. It's about her specifically and the world that she had to live in. So like that's what I'm trying to get to. Although I agree with you that I could do it without the sounds, but I would like to keep the pointing.
Or hold that.
I would
Yeah.
like to keep
Hold that until the very end.
Yeah.
See how much you can accomplish before you use that type of instrument, because once you use that kind of force, it's hard to de-escalate back down to just spoken word jokes.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love the idea of her smell being so of her, like, she was friends with Mark Twain. I'm like, yeah, she didn't even know the name Mark Twain. She had no concept of the letters or the sounds. She just knew him as like, oh, we're smelling farts this side of the Mississippi. You know, like,
Yeah. Also, Mark Twain was like a borderline stalker. Like he had like a unreturned level of crush on her, and like was her suitor. And it's like, what was Mark Twain into? Like that's like you know, I'm just, it's just like, come on, Mark, like, hey, like, you know,
I have a different joke. How does it feel to get rejected by Helen Keller? She's like, I'm sorry, I want to not see other people.
That's a high five. I'm giving you a high five. I like that.
Thank you very much.
I'll use that. Also, okay, I could left turn, and if people feel like I was about to make fun of Helen Keller,
seeing anyone right now? No.
What was that? Oh, I couldn't hear the last.
You can flip it and be like, how do you ask out, Helen Keller? Are you seeing anyone right now? No.
I like how you're like, hey, don't do the act out. It's mean. And then you're like, here's 7. here's
mean, but their mean can be such a different. It's so fun to be mean, you know, like in a, yeah.
I like the idea of really roasting, because I love writing roasts. It's like I'm a naturally mean person, and I've been trained to be mean professionally. So when I'm writing a roast, I feel more in my element than when I'm like trying to be funny in a way that is supportive to everyone's emotions. So I like the idea of roasting the people that lived around her, right? Like for being disgusting, and Mark Twain for being kind of creepy. And then maybe some third person. I'd have to come up with who the third person is. But like, I like the idea of like Helen Keller's hell, right? Is how dumb the people are. And also she's smarter than them. Like she wrote like 16 books. So like she was smarter than most of the people she interacted with. She was just tortured by not being able to tell them how dumb they were. I like that. I like that juxtaposition. Anyway, that's
I like having that place of respect for her.
Yeah.
Is what comes through in the way you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I also love the idea of just shitting on Mark Twain because he's such a revered figure.
Yeah.
That it's easy to take him. I hate the punch up, punch down nomenclature. I think it's a stupid way, but it is refreshing for a joke that exalts Helen Keller and degrades Mark Twain.
Yeah. Also, you know, he probably owned slaves, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't get that far into it on Wikipedia.
You love the N-word.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take Mark Twain down. Like, people aren't talking about it. Like, we're taking these Confederate statues down. Why don't we take stalker Mark Twain down? Like, that's what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I like
cancel Mark Twain. Also, I'm a huge Mark Twain. To be fair, I'm a huge Mark Twain fan. I believe he is credited with the quote you said earlier about the longer letters, right?
That's right.
Is that where that came from?
That's right. Yeah.
It's not actually true that the quote goes way farther back, like Greek era. But Mark Twain, someone called him, he learned how to tweet before Twitter. He has some of the best lines ever. Oh, what was it? When I was 18 years old, I thought my dad was the dumbest man in the world. And when I turned 21, I was amazed at how much he'd learned in just 3 years. Guy was slick with words.
I like how you...
One-liner king.
I like how you were like, hey, this is your citation, right, Mark Twain? And I was like, yeah. So you corrected me. Then you corrected the Wikipedia entry. You were like, actually, it's misattributed. So you were like, not only are you wrong, but...
It's a lost attribution, but... He deserves the attribution. You know what I mean? I'm like, he has enough other hits that, you know what I mean? It's like people credit jokes to Mitch Hedberg that weren't his.
To show how much I prepared.
Or Betty White. Go
ahead.
Yeah. There's a quote that's attributed to Betty White that's actually like stolen from another comedian. She never said it at all, but they put the quote over a picture of her and it went viral.
Might
have been Shing Wang's joke.
We're living in a meme society now where people can just put, a picture and then a quote. Helen Keller actually was accused of stealing a book. So she wrote 16, and like one of them she wrote as a child was like almost word for word, like identical to another book. and they attributed it to cryptomnesia. So like someone had read this story. Oh damn! Did I lose the internet again? Brutal. Yeah, you there?
I'm back.
Yeah.
You said Helen Keller, and then it just died.
It looks like the producer keeps killing my mic. He's like, this guy's about to do something offensive. Yeah, no, Helen Keller wrote like 16 books. She was accused of stealing one. She Carlos Mencia'd a book where like it was like it's true. Like there's a whole, I really researched this Helen Keller bit. Yeah, so it was called like the Ice Princess or like the Ice Giant, and like whatever her version was like the inverse of that. And someone had read it to her at some point.
Fire midget.
What was that?
The fire midget.
yeah, that. It's
so the inverse of the ice giant. Okay.
Yeah, no, okay. See, here's the thing: you're too smart, man. That's like I'm telling you, like you're like, oh, I don't know why this joke works because we're dumb. Like we can't compete that fast, dude. That's really. But yeah, she Carlos Mencia'd a book, and then someone came back like 2 years later because they didn't have like instant spell check, and they're like, hey, this is basically my book, and then they were like, she probably didn't mean it, like she just heard it. I guess not heard it, but like someone had read it to her at some point in her childhood, and she thought that story was her own. So there's just Helen Keller. You could do a special on Helen Keller, like just the Helen Keller special. Yeah.
One thing I said earlier of the two things that lead to strong, long jokes for me is the first is personal, vulnerable, a thing that makes me feel isolated or less, and sharing extensively on that always tends to, that is the best ingredient for a joke that becomes a great chunk, that becomes a late night set, that becomes good clips. The other ingredient is and this kind of works in a separate pool, is an extensive base of knowledge on something that is quirky, interesting, but kind of minute, which was for me my jokes about like the etymology of gynecological terms, and a deep base of knowledge on like how certain drugs are created. Those were some of my longest jokes, even though they weren't personal. I think what you have there is a deep knowledge of Helen Keller. All of the things you've told me about her are new information to me, and I would be excited to learn all these things in line with laughter and punchlines at a comedy club. I think if you can't rope people in on the personal level, being educational and entertaining at the same time is also a really great way to keep the crowd pulled in and not just going from punchline to punchline.
I love that.
So I think you should expand this and see how many minutes you can get out of a Helen Keller joke, because I hear like 7 separate premises in other things you've told me.
One of the reasons I'm so excited about doing this show, and I'm excited about seeing what the monkeys have been writing in the comment section. I'm sure they had some really respectful and tasteful comments for the Helen Keller section. You have made it further than 99% of people who will try to start comedy, maybe 99.5, right? If you're a math guy, I'm sure you've thought about what percentile you fall into. Describe your writing process, if you could.
In need of a lot of discipline and revamping. Writing for me is I will reference Jerry Seinfeld did an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast that is required listening for anyone who's listening to this podcast. You can stop right now and go listen to that, because I'm going to add nothing beyond what they say there. But mostly it's about being gentle with yourself, sitting down and typing. Doesn't matter. What I mostly believe is that I'm not going to have new ideas when I sit down. I'm almost resigned to that fact. It is just to review the ideas I've already had. Biggest thing I do is whenever I have an idea, I text it to myself right away. If it's dumb, as long as it just makes me excited, or if it's a punchline, or if it's just a fun word, or if it's hey, flip this joke. You have this joke and you've been saying it wrong. Maybe if you just reorder it a little bit, or put this joke here. Any notes on maybe even performance of a joke. So I just have a string of ideas that I've thought throughout the day, because that's when you're going to have a new joke, is when you're out doing other things, not when you're sitting looking at a cursor blinking on a blank screen. When I sit down, it's just to revisit those ideas. And even if I'm just retyping something I already know is funny, that is fine. If it's just, I did this joke last night, here's how I said it. I already know how I said it. I'm not going to get it wrong, but let's just type it out. And when I type it out, I see 3 extra words. that are unnecessary. I see that I'm a bit lengthy in the setup. I cut those. And then a lot of times as I type it, another idea pops into my head. There's something about typing it into a screen that releases your brain holding on to the joke and allows those hands to reach out and grab new ideas and attach them. And if I can do that for even 10 minutes a day, which I don't do every day, I will have more ideas. And then when I get on stage, just having typed it out will loosen me up when I perform the joke, that I might even have a new idea while I do it. I think it's very, very important to plan your set list every time, every single time. There's a stage in comedy where you realize you don't have to plan and you can go up there and still do well because you have enough autopilot material. Plan the jokes, plan where you're going to do the new jokes, because you have to make sure a new joke is between two good jokes, because you can't try two new jokes in a row, because if the first one misses, then the second one is almost guaranteed to miss because it's pulling out, and then you get a false negative on that new joke, and you perhaps give up on a joke that had potential, which is a tragedy for someone trying to write jokes, to lose something that was actually good. But just sit down and type.
What do you think is the biggest reason why people aren't funny?
Ego. Comedy is extremely iterative. It is, a lot of people can learn it. Not everyone can learn it, but a lot of people can learn it through the very simple algorithm of attempt, assess, adjust. I think I start out with as bad of ideas as anyone, and I attempt them, and I have to listen and hear what the crowd thinks of it, not what I want them to think of it. And that process is always going to be hard. It's always going to be hard to accept that rejection. But once you accept that rejection and the assessment process and remove your ego and remove that void, the worst thing, not the worst thing, but one of the most destructive forces in the creative process of writing comedy is, well, I like it. Get that out of your head. Doesn't matter. If they didn't like it after 3 tries, you give it 1 try, could be a false negative. Second try doesn't work anyway. That's rare. Mathematically, that means it already has a really bad batting average. Third time, out. No chance. No chance. If it failed 3 times and you're hoping for every joke should be well over 90% consistency. And if you fail 3 times, the odds of that happening and the joke still being a 90% jokes are what? 1 in 1,000, 10 to the third, 1 over 10 to the third. The thing that gets in the way is that inability to adjust. And of course, you need creativity in the adjustment portion. You need to be able to creatively and move towards a better joke with the instincts of a good writer. But that is, again, only learned through doing this over and over again, of writing just a lot of bad jokes.
What's your biggest weakness as a comic?
Not very present on stage, not very adaptive, just a little too married to my material. And I'll also add, I could spend more time writing, especially for someone who clearly needs the writing portion. I can't get by on just being goofy and making faces and noises. I should certainly take my own writing part a little more seriously.
Can we unpack this? Because you said 3 things, and I think each one is incredible, because you're good. You're good at what you do. I'm not puffing smoke up your ass. Just by numbers, we could look at numbers and see how good you are, how many views you have, how much money you make in comedy, the people that you've made laugh, any metric that we want to use. And let's break down. I heard 3 things, right? So I heard present, adaptive, and then write more. Let's talk about present.
I would write.
How do you recognize?
I would marry present and adaptive, if that's okay.
I might not let you, but I want to hear. I want to hear. Why do you see those?
Because being present means willing to adapt to the room as it happens, and being in that moment and being able to go with the joke if that is where I am being pulled. But it's also being able to hear a phone ring and follow that down and follow my instincts and be genuine in how it makes me feel and communication of that. And say the first thing that comes to mind, and not pause and try to think of something clever, then fail, and then seem ingenuine and not funny. But that I have that kind of I seek the perfect joke, and there no such thing exists. So that always pulls me away from having those real loose sets where I don't have any a closer. I'm not trying to get towards this joke, and this joke is to get to the next one, and being very, oh, that joke didn't get the reaction I want, so I should maybe, think about this next joke and all this stuff that's not letting me be genuine, a genuine human person emoting, because that is all we are paying to see.
I'd like to give my impression of that. So there's infinite levels to comedy, but a level that I more recently became aware of is when I've been listening to myself the whole time. So I've audio recorded almost every set that I've ever done. So like I listen to myself. So I'm very conscious of how I sound, but I only recently became more conscious of how I freaking look, dude. And like, I get why people don't like me. Like I look some stage of like pissed off and aggressive, even when I'm in a good mood. Like that's just like who I am as a person.
I have vice principal energy, yeah.
Except you're more handsome.
Yeah, but I have that scowling kind of face when I talk. Yeah.
My dad went to prison when I was 2, and I have his eyes. So I have guilty by a jury of your peers, and
Wow.
like that's like the energy that I bring. And so I've tried to acknowledge that. So when I watch video recordings of myself, I've been lied to by the audio, because the audio is like, oh, listen to this like sound, but the visual is this this big 235-pound guy like standing over the mic. Like I'm like, damn, like I gotta fix that. So when you talk about being present, right, what I'm hearing is there's this constant battle, I think, for comics where like I've heard Ralphie May has a really good video on YouTube where he talks about taking acting classes. And I think that he recommends everyone take acting classes. And it's like, I think the acting classes are valuable because it teaches you to be aware of how you look. And so when you're talking about being present on stage, I can't really be present on stage if I don't know how the crowd perceives me. So I have to like become aware of how the crowd perceives me so that I can impact it, so that I can change it, so that I can be present.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So bringing it back to you and your present, do you think that it's a inability to see it in real time, or do you think it's more you're more interested in the material than
the latter? I'm obsessed with the material and like how this joke will work, and is this going to be my next hour, or is this going to be part of something else that'll expand? And just being too obsessed with I view it as I coded a little bit in college, and I'm just compiling and running and debugging the material like it's code, and that's not a way to be. I have moments of being present. I'm not good at riffing. I'm not good at crowd work, and I would love to learn those skills because I think it would make my material that much better. That's the thing you learn in acting classes. If you say if you say the same line the same way too many times, there's nothing you can do to make it sound real, no matter how good of an actor you are. But if you say it in a new way that is honest to you, it will look real because it is. The best acting is not acting, as they always say. But
who's your favorite comedian that we haven't heard of?
I mean, I don't mean to insult him because he should be more famous, but it's not that he's not successful already. Sean Patton, especially live, you should go online if you're listening and see when he's in a city near you, because he is the best live performer, like number one in my opinion. And you talk about someone who I've heard him do a joke, and then a month later I saw him do the same joke all in a Southern accent for no reason, or an Italian accent for no reason, and it was just as funny, but it had such a different it was so different, but it was all the same jokes. And then he'll go on these long stories, and I never know what's new and what's old and what he's coming up with on the spot. And yeah, he's quite brilliant. He is I mean, a brilliant writer, but he is following all of his emotions to the ends of the earth and back with you. He's the best at that.
I love it. Okay, last question. Thank you so much for being on. What is one thing, if you could time travel and go back and tell yourself as a comedian, what is one thing that you would tell yourself in your first month in comedy now?
Probably nothing, but
Just let it. Don't mess with
Fairly
the
happy
sign.
with things where things are, and I think any lesson. Great line by Kid Cudi. We remember the things that our parents have said, and would rather find out the hard way. Um, I don't think I would have received the advice no matter what, but it would be to be don't be cocky. Don't think you're better than anyone. Don't write off any other comedian, no matter what you think of them or their jokes or whether they're hacky or inexperienced. Everyone is a completely different person. Their comedic persona is a full human who may do some things poorly, but in other places exceeds in ways you could never dream of. So take something from everyone, treat everyone with respect and that they deserve, and just be kind and generous and have no outward ego about what you do. Inwardly, have all the ego you want, but outwardly, just listen to everyone, take something from everyone.
I love that. Thank you so much for the time, Matthew Broussard. Links are in the bio. MondayPunDay on Instagram. What are you excited about that's evergreen?
No, YouTube. Just find me on YouTube. Watch all those clips, or my Instagram has some of my favorite clips on it. MondayPunDay. Check out MondayPunday.com. That's still up. It's about 500 puzzles. Try to solve them all. Message me if you can't get any. So.
I love it. I'm excited to see where your career goes in the next couple of years, man. You're one of my favorites. I think you're one of the strongest writers in the game. So I'm really happy to have you on. And if your monkeys are at home, I want to see how you punched up our jokes. So until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe.